I'm very often asked by other beekeepers about my apiary and how I do my beekeeping. So I'm just briefly going to tell you a little bit about it. Now, we all keep bees in different ways, and the way I keep my bees I've developed over the years based largely on experience and listening to bees. It may well be different than you've been taught, but in my mind, providing things work, they suit the beekeeper, and they don't damage or harm the bees. I don't really mind how people keep their bees. Some of what you see here, you may think, cool, I wouldn't do it that way. That's absolutely fine. As long as you've got an alternative and you've got a good reason for it, that is fine by me. I haven't got a problem with that. Now, I started keeping bees in 1963, and things have changed greatly in that time. Things have come in like, let's say, oilseed rape, varroa's come in as well. Attitudes have changed, regulations have changed, and that sort of thing. And we have, to a degree, as beekeepers, we've had to try and follow them, which of course I do, and it's probably reflected a little bit in what you see here. Now, in over 60 years of beekeeping, I've learned a lot of things by watching other beekeepers, especially, and certainly some of the older beekeepers weren't particularly good at teaching. Well, they were good to learn from, but they weren't particularly good at teaching. And certainly us country folk, we tend to learn by watching people and copying them, working out what they're trying to do, rather than perhaps learning from books as a modern beekeeper would. So some of the things that I do, that you see me do, you may not even have heard of or thought that exist. And with some of our live at the Hive and videos and that sort of thing, I very often get comments from people, oh, I never knew that, or I've never seen that before. As some of my friends tell me, I really ought to get some of this either written down or on video before it's too late. Now, I've done all my own beekeeping really in basically a rural area. Where I'm standing now is literally 3 miles from where I was born. Yes, I have moved around quite a bit, but mainly visiting other beekeepers. But all my own beekeeping has been done within a short distance of where I am at the moment in West Sussex. Now, the area is traditionally no more than middling for honey. It's not a great area, but you always manage to get something, either trees or plants, either growing in the fields or perhaps some of the water courses, the rivers. We always tend to get a little bit. No, none of the massive crops that you always hear about. But if you have a look around here, you'll see colonies. When there's one there with a brood chamber on, and 1, 2, 3 supers, and I know they're all full. So there's probably on that 3, 4, 12. There's probably £150 of honey on that one there. Take this hive here as an example, if indeed you can see it. It's on a single brood chamber. It's got a brood chamber there that's been used as a super, and it's got 1, 2, 3 supers on. Now, I know that lot is full because a week or so ago I tried to lift that and I struggled with it. So we've probably got approaching £150 of honey on that colony there. Now, that is the second take because we took some off earlier. So that colony there, although I don't make records, I'm pretty certain that colony has produced or will produce £200 of honey this year. Now, as I say, I've travelled widely in my beekeeping. I've been to quite a lot of other countries and also throughout the UK as well. And I see different beekeepers keeping sometimes different kinds of bees in different conditions. And I've learned an awful lot from that. Some of the things I see elsewhere I can't use in my own apiary, but some of the other things I could probably think, yeah, that's a good idea, I'll do that. Or perhaps I'll modify it slightly to suit my own way of working. And that's how I built up my knowledge and the way that I do things. Now, what you've got to remember as a beekeeper, and not everybody does, is that we all have a system. Every beekeeper has a system. Even if you get 30 people that are trained by the same person, they will all have their own individual system, and it will suit their interest in bees. Some people may be interested in maximum honey crop, others may just want it for the fun, others may want to be beekeepers because they're interested in photography or art or microscopy or something like that. So we do things for different reasons. Also, something which a lot of people don't seem to realise is that if you have different amount of time than somebody else, let's say you're away at work during the week, your management system is going to be different than somebody who's there all the time. So you need to be aware that you've got a system all the time. And this is one of the reasons why you very often get conflicting advice, because people will tell you something based on what they do rather than what you do. Over the years I've removed many free living colonies. Pre-Varroa it was largely out of trees and a few out of buildings, and at one stage I was removing about 12 to 15 a year. Since Varroa it's generally buildings rather than trees, and in doing so I've learned an awful lot from bees. And some of the stuff that I see that bees do this, bees do that, bees do something else, may not always be reliable, because I very often see things that are different than what I read in books. But the great thing about handling free living colonies is that you can learn an awful lot from them. Where they put their drone comb, and take that as an example. In general, they bees put drone comb on the periphery of the nest. It's easy enough to humanise bees. My guess is that they only need it when they've got the colony expanded, and of course they don't need it during the winter at all. Now I take that into my own apiary, because what I've also noticed with a free living colony is, and this is only an estimate, between perhaps 10 and 15% of total area of drone comb. So what I do with most of my colonies is to put a drone comb not right next to the outside but the next one in. So an 11 frames box, that's roughly 10% of the total area, and it's on the edge where the bees need it. If you put it in the middle, I think what will happen is it will retard expansion in the spring when the queen's usually just laying drone eggs. Now, I obviously can't show you here, but what I've discovered is that if you put a frame in like that, what it means is that the bees aren't under pressure to break down worker comb to build drone comb. And when people do put a swarm on the foundation, or perhaps do a shook swarm or something like that, what do? They put it all on worker. Now, if the bees need 10 to 15%, where are they going to produce it? They can't without breaking down something that's already there. And usually what they do is they break it down on several combs. What I've found is that if you do one comb of drone, they don't usually put so much drone in the rest of the colony. So that's one simple thing, and I don't think I've ever seen that in a book anywhere. Not only have I learnt from bees, and they are, in my opinion, the best teachers. And as I keep telling people, the best teachers have got 6 legs and they've got 4 wings, not 2 legs and stand in front of in front of people. I've also learnt a lot from really good beekeepers, and when I say really good, I mean the quiet sort of people who just get on and do the job, not the sort of modern motor mouse that've been keeping bees 20 minutes and know it all. I've also learnt quite a lot from old books, probably 100 years ago, around about the turn of the 20th century. Yes, you've obviously got to sort the wheat from the chaff because of the amount that things have developed, and some of the things that they used in those days, perhaps for dealing with foul brood, they may not even be available now. But you certainly wouldn't be allowed to use them even if they were. But some of the genuine beekeeping techniques are still very, very sound, and there's a lot of stuff there that the modern beekeeper just doesn't know. They're just not exposed to it because they're not taught it. In learning from bees, I think I try to provide them and work with them to give them what they want, not what humans think they want. Unfortunately, these days we have what I call beekeeping by numbers mentality, where in the sort of 3rd week in March you do so and so, and halfway through April you do so and so. Beekeeping, I found, isn't like this. We're dealing largely with biology, and there's other things that come into it, like the weather. So if I'm coming down to look for the bees, I generally look for the weather forecast a week in advance, because a good strong colony will fill a super and cap it in a week. But on the other hand, if you've got a poor week, if you've got a really strong colony of prolific bees, they can eat it. And as I very often say to people, if a colony is strong enough to fill a super in a week, it's strong enough to empty it in a week too. Because of my background, I was born and brought up on a small farm. I've been in the country all my life, and been an engineer all my working life. And also, when I was young, we still had the make do and mend mentality from the war. You know, I'm good at using these. And it doesn't matter what material you're working in, you can generally get something something made or repaired or modified to suit yourself. And I tend to be a little bit on the frugal side, like my bees, and I tend to make things where I can. And there's an example there. I've got a brood chamber there for a national that's made out of a WBC one with just battens around the side. Absolutely fine. Okay, I can only get 10 combs in there, but that doesn't matter. Now, there's a tiny bit of a story with that. Since about the mid-1980s, I've been the auctioneer, or one of the auctioneers at the West Sussex auction, and there were 18 WBC boxes. They were almost the last lot, and of course everybody had gone home and nobody wanted them, so I had them for myself for £1. And the whole lot are here somewhere, and I've done exactly the same with them. So effectively, I've got 18 national boxes for £1. So that's the sort of thing. A lot of things, well, nobody wanted them. I dislike waste as well. I try to recycle things where I possibly can, and that box I've just shown you, the plinths going around the side are tile battens that I took out of a skip when somebody was re-roofing a house just up the road here. I make my own foundation, or largely I do anyway. I bought my foundation press about 2 years after I started keeping bees, so about 1965, and I can tell you I paid £7.10 for it, and it's one of the very few British standard ones. Most of them were Dayton size, but I managed to get it, and I've made thousands of sheets of foundation. Now there is a cost saving to it, obviously, but what I've found is that you're recycling your own wax, whereas if you buy commercial foundation, you don't know where the wax has come from. And I've done this experiment several times. I've alternated throughout a box homemade foundation and commercial foundation, and what I found was, in general, the bees prefer homemade foundation to commercial. I don't know why. It might be because of the age of the commercial foundation, or it might be the aroma, or whatever, because the structure is slightly different, because homemade foundation is cast, commercial foundation is rolled, so it might have something to do with the structure. I don't know, but anyway, I've always found that it's worked. Now I've got a main press which is worker, and I've also got a slightly different one which is drone, which I use in supers. I much prefer a drone comb in supers because, in general, bees don't put pollen in a drone comb, they only put it in worker comb. Now I have pollen in drone comb, but not very often. That makes it easier for extracting, as far as I'm concerned, and the extractor doesn't go out of balance when you're when you've extracted most of the honey, as it does, especially with a small extractor. But I certainly much prefer drone comb in supers. Now I mentioned free living colonies, so bees in trees, bees in houses, where they have selected their own home and they've survived for some time. Personally, I think they're a tremendous resource. They do get kicked in by people who, quite frankly, I think don't know much about them. Yeah, the winter is a really good selection tool, because if the characteristics of the colony aren't what nature wants, it doesn't mess about, it's just gone, it's just out of it. What do I mean by uniform? They're usually fairly dark. The workers, there will be some yellow bands in amongst them, but overall they're darker than I see in a lot of managed colonies. Just don't get yellow drones, don't get yellow queens if they've been there over one winter. Yes, if they've only just gone in there, yes they will, and I can assume they've just come from managed colonies. They're very frugal, they look after the food that they got. They don't turn all the food that they got into brood. The queens are usually fairly non-prolific. They're usually very healthy. Never have I seen chalk brood any more than perhaps just the odd cell, and the same with sac brood. And I've never ever come across foul brood, not once. But I have in several managed colonies where I've visited somebody or done a demonstration somewhere, and I've come across foul brood, mainly European rather than American. And the other thing is, which I think probably needs a little bit of research, is that usually the temper is actually very good. If they've only just gone in there and they haven't had the winter to take them out, then very often they can be quite unpleasant. So I'm thinking to myself, well, if bees are up there living in a tree on their own without any human intervention, they're going to be tough bees. They're probably going to be the best ones that suit our area. Therefore, I want those sort of bees in my apiary. So if I do come across a swarm that I know's come from a free living nest, I'll have it. But what I've generally done over the years is selected my bees for the characteristics that I see in the wild. So yes, I'm happy to say they are locally adapted. I think they do quite well considering the area. I generally run the so-called cold weight, and most of the hives you'll see the cold weight, apart from perhaps those here on a long stand, like this one here I'm running the warm way. There's one over there I'm running the warm way, and that's simply because instead of getting in amongst the stand here to handle the frames, I can do it from the back. So that's just making it easier for me. Where this one here, let's say, I can work from the side, and this one here I can work from the side, but that one there I can't, so I've got to work from the back. Does it make any difference? Quite honestly, I don't think it does too much. I have seen isolation starvation when bees are run the so-called warm way, but it's probably not worth worrying about. Now, because I consider myself a sort of small-scale amateur beekeeper, I tend to use my bees for a variety of reasons. You can see that some of them have got quite large amounts of honey on, but others perhaps have got a lot less. I do try out different techniques if I hear something from somewhere. If I think it's going to be a benefit, I don't do it on all my colonies, I just do it on some, and that's really one of the best ways of learning. And it's surprising what you can pick up to try and work out how bees will respond to what humans will do. I do produce bees, few for sale, and I also produce queens as well, but I don't sell queens. Now, what I do, I've got about 27 colonies here. Normally it's 20 to 25, but I had a couple of swarms come in, and this apiary isn't very big. I've measured it recently. It's 9.5 metres by 9.5 metres. Now, some people will say, oh, you've got far too many colonies in there, without thinking about what I've got. Don't forget, I've got non-prolific queens. If you've got prolific queens, then they're producing a lot of brood. Brood is incredibly hungry, so what do they need to do? They need to plunder the environment to simply just feed the brood that they probably don't need. Not only does it affect the amount of nectar for bees, it also affects the amount of nectar for other pollinating insects. If somebody says you've got too many bees in one area, there's your answer there. As well as the things that I do, various techniques I try, and a bit of honey production, raising queens and that sort of thing. Obviously it's a source of enjoyment. There's no point in having a life if you're not going to enjoy it, because despite what people have told me on several occasions, I think this is the only time that I'm going to be here, so I'm going to make the most use of it if I possibly can. If you have a look around here, and you can scan around a bit if you like, there's quite a lot of fairly old kit. There's some boxes here, like this one here, that is probably 50 years old. No, it's more than that, because that's an old style national box, and from what I can find out from old catalogues and that sort of thing, they stopped producing them about the mid 1960s. And when I started keeping bees, you had the option of the standard national and the what's become known as the modified national. Yeah, take this hive as an example. That brood chamber there is the old style one, and then they made the other type, which is called the modified national. But of course now these are just called nationals. But when I started keeping bees, they sold both of these. I much prefer what's called the modified national, because of course we've got the handholds. The old style national, we just had these inserts here, and you were hanging on to a whole box by the tips of your fingers, which wasn't ideal. Although most of my kit is quite old, it's still workable, and it's still productive, and I get honey every year, even in poor years when other people aren't. Now, with the type of bees I've got, I only feed very, very lightly in the autumn. Last year, which was the autumn of 2024, I didn't feed here at all. I have 2 out apiaries, and I fed both of those, but only fairly lightly. So that's one of the benefits of locally adapted bees, that you're not poking a load of food into them that is sugar and not their natural food. Now, the last time I fed during the summer was in 1976, which was a drought year, when the flowers were just not secreting nectar. The ground was so dry that there was no moisture in it, and all bees were starving, everything. So in order to keep them alive, we had to feed them. But I don't feed during the summer, as a lot of people do, almost as a matter of course. But of course it's because they probably use imported queens or derivatives of imported queens, Buckfast, Italians, those sort of things, and the queens produce big brood nests, and brood, as I've already said, is incredibly hungry. I do largely work on nationals, single brood chambers most of the time. You may see one or two here with double brood chamber, but that's probably for a reason. It might be as a result of being united, or perhaps I'm building a colony up then to split it. Largely nationals. I've got two commercials, and here's one here, and I've got no one over there, and I've got at the moment 4 Patterson hives. Apart from the commercials, everything's got British standard frames. The commercials really were a bit of an accident, because I discovered when I used apideas for mating, I discovered I could get 6 apidea frames in a commercial frame, but I could only get 2 in a British standard frame. So I set those up specifically for producing comb and brood in apideas. I will now probably stop them, because they are a tiny bit of a nuisance. They are bottom bee space, and if I need to put a super on, then it's got to be a standard box rather than one of mine. I have my own design of nuke box, and this is an example here. Internally, it's half the size of a national box, so it's effectively 5.5 frames. That's absolutely ideal, because I can put a division board down the side. I can take that out, and then I can easily take the frames out without rolling bees. I've got some with floors fixed, and some boxes that are effectively smaller versions of the national box. So this one here I've really just set up to try and get the bees to go right up through the middle as they would naturally. You know, a tiny bit of experiment, if indeed you want to call it that. These boxes, they're easy enough to make, just the same as the Patterson hive. I've made some of them out of national seconds box, and some I've just made out of odd bits of wood that I've managed to clean from various places. But the cost of that is next to nothing, and you know, that's really my method of beekeeping. Keep it cheap if you can. Now, I assess colonies all the time, sometimes not my own. If I go to somebody else, then I'm always thinking, these aren't bad bees, or I'm glad I haven't got these. I'm just doing it as almost a habit. I have to say I am quite ruthless, so that if there's something that I don't like, I don't mess about, it's just out with it. When you're doing that, you need to raise queens. Well, I'm the apiary manager of the local beekeeping association, teaching apiary at Whisper Green, and I do tend to run the queens together, not the bees, but the queens together. So overall, we probably got 80 to 100 colonies that I'm working with. Now that is more than the ordinary beekeeper I accept, But what it does mean is that I'm raising queens quite a lot of the time, and as soon as I get something that I don't like, it can be out and replaced. In fact, there are two colonies here that came in as swarms, and it only took me a week to decide that both of those queens would go. They were, well, one was certainly spiteful, and the other one was, let's say, a bit spiky, and there's a difference. And they got the Patterson boot treatment fairly quickly. I do clip and mark all my queens. If you're running this sort of number, I think it's important that you clip as much as anything to try and manage the swarming, because sooner or later you're gonna lose swarms. You've got a much better chance of keeping them at home if you clip your queens. At least at the bottom of your garden, you come down and have a look at bees at night, and if you see a cluster of bees on the ground, you know something somewhere has swarmed. Whereas if you didn't notice it, and somebody else has got a chimney full of bees that they don't really want. Marking, I think, it doesn't bother me too much, because I'm reasonably good at finding queens. I've had a little bit of practice, but it's much easier to find queens, and I use pink marker pen. I don't bother with international colours. I find pink is much easier to see. If not, out of the other colours, I think probably yellow is, but I certainly find pink easy to use. Now, because I'm so busy, I don't extract my own honey. I help with putting the clear boards on, but somebody else does that, and they take it and they deal with it. So I don't get involved with that. I mentioned some of the methods that I use. There's some of the old-fashioned methods, and my beekeeping is sort of what one might term down to earth. So some of the methods that I show, especially on Live at the Hive, may not be found in books. Unless it's an emergency, I gave up putting foundation in the brood chamber a long time ago, and certainly in this area, what I discovered was that if you put foundation in the brood nest, bees only build comb if they've got the need for it and they've got an income with which to produce the wax. So if you just put a sheet of foundation in the brood chamber, if you get, let's say, a week's bad weather, the bees tend to climb all over it, make it go all sort of shiny, and lose the embossed area of the outside of the cell. Another week's bad weather, which we often get in this country, we have rather a fickle climate. The bees then start chewing holes in it, very often along the wires, which is interesting. Anyway. If that period comes to an end, out comes the sun, the temperature rises. What do the bees do? They go out, let's say there's a nectar flow on, and they then start building on the foundation, and they make a mess of it usually, building comb on the side of it, and rather than drawing out the foundation. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if you put foundation in a brood nest, very often what will happen is, if it's in a nectar flow, the bees will draw it out quickly and then fill it with nectar. So of course then that makes a barrier which the queen usually won't go beyond. So I put these two together and I thought, well, there's got to be a different way. So what I do now, and have done for over 40 years, is get the combs drawn out above the queen excluder in a brood chamber that's used as a super. And what I find is you get combs drawn out much better, partly I think because in the brood chamber there's a lot more bees in there climbing all over the comb, but if there's something above the queen excluder, so away from the brood chamber or brood nest, that don't need to be on. They won't do any more than just sort of get a few bees on it, so it doesn't get sort of tired. And when the time is ready, the bees will then draw it out well. You can then use that for several reasons. You can either use it as a super, so you can extract it, or if you're only an amateur beekeeper, you can use that for winter food, and perhaps to feed a nucleus or anything like that. But it's not quite as simple as that, because if you just put it on, sometimes the bees tend not to work it too well. So what I do is put a super on first, super of drawn comb, not foundation, drawn comb, and when the bees have started working in that and there's a nectar flow on, then put the brood chamber of foundation above that, not below, above that. So what you generally find is that, let's say that super is there, the bees start working in the middle first, they put nectar in it, and then when that's at the bottom, they will come into the brood chamber and start working and drawing out the middle frames. That's the time to reverse the two boxes, because you know there's a nectar flow on, and when there's a nectar flow on, if there's a need for comb, the bees will build out foundation. So they'll build out that fill it with nectar, and then they'll carry on filling up whatever you put above it. That's the way that I've found that works really well. And I've got several here. This is one of them. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can see 6 boxes out of the 20 some odd that I've done this with. But if I'd have put foundation in the brood chambers, this year 2025 would have been okay, but most years I'd have had some pretty poor combs built as a result. Now, I'm fairly well known for having never worn a bee suit in my life, a bee suit or a tunic in fact. I tried to get one on me once to do a video, but I refused, and I'll tell you what happened after that. And I just don't wear gloves. And I find that people who wear gloves, especially those thick ones, they can't feel anything, they're clunky, and they certainly don't know the mood of the bees. Whereas if I think you've got a bit of skin exposed, it certainly concentrates your mind, and you'll know when to either give it a little bit more smoke, or if things do get a bit hot, you just close up and walk away. I won't criticise people for wearing whatever they want or keeping the bees in whichever way they wish, but I don't wear them. So what we've got here is what one might term good old-fashioned beekeeping, down-to-earth beekeeping. It won't help anybody pass any exams, but it probably treats the bees the way they want to be treated. I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and that you managed to get something from it.